Hello, my name is Keith, and welcome to Denver Parks and Recreation Tennis at Home. We're so glad to have you join us, and we want to talk a little bit today about an activity that you obviously love and enjoy. It's one that's a passion of mine, and I've played tennis for many years, and I really enjoy the activity, the camaraderie, the socialization, all of the things that kind of go along with just making it a very fun activity. I've learned over the years that tennis is the sport for a lifetime. So that means you can start at any point in life. And so it's really great to be able to get more people involved. And we hope that you won't find any barriers to inclusion, but we really want you to be involved. And can I emphasize the word simple? You see, many years ago, I learned from a very good tennis instructor. His name was Tom. He called himself Tom the Tennis Warrior. And one of his philosophies for tennis was learn to do what's simple, learn to do what's simple better, and simply become the best at doing what's simple. Did I just really blow your mind with that? That's okay. I'll get back to that because I love talking about that philosophy. It really is what drives me each day that I get out to practice or to play or to even spend some time in instruction. Let's talk about a few more things. Let's talk about your tennis equipment. How many of you have been kind of preparing to get your rackets back out and dust them off and make sure that your vibration dampener is on the racket, you know, those cool ones your coaches give you, and make sure as you bring those things out, let's make sure we're using the proper equipment. And what do I mean by that? Well, number one, we want to make sure you're measured properly. When you have a tennis racket, it's very important it's the proper length for you. I know your parents have some really cool looking tennis rackets, but depending on your height, that racket may be a little too long and you may end up dragging it on the ground. Well, if you end up doing this while you're standing tall, that racket is probably too long. There are so many different ways that we can also improve that. On the market today, and some of you already know this, there are different sizes. This is just one of many. But tennis rackets can come in approximately 4 lengths. We have 21-inch rackets, we have 23-inch rackets, 25, which are kind of the junior youth size rackets, and then 27, which is the model I have, which is the adult size. So again, just make sure you get the proper equipment. It's going to help you a lot better. As you can see, this racket's a little too short for me, right? I'd have to do this to make it touch the ground. So that's what I want to encourage, is that you're considering that you're going to use the proper equipment. So parents, as you're also listening in, think about maybe going online and thinking about looking at your child's height and getting a measurement to see if one of those appropriate rackets would be the best, because it's going to support their learning. It's going to support the ability for them with strength to hold it accordingly and to swing it properly. Something that's a little too big, it's going to lag a little bit behind and they're going to be late and it's going to be tough and they're going to use 2 hands, and that could be a struggle and it could be a discouragement. So we just don't want that to happen. That's why using the proper equipment, having the right size is very, very important. Okay? Let's talk about tennis balls. There are several different types as well. I'm going to start with my favorite here, which is this big squishy foam tennis ball. Now you would think this tennis ball would not be effective. Absolutely the opposite. As a matter of fact, it works very well because it bounces according to the height of children as they're growing accordingly. So therefore, when the ball's coming, it's not going to bounce over their head, which really impacts their technical development because we want them swinging in a very comfortable zone. So if you're able to go to a sporting goods store, these could be a little expensive, so take care of them. They come in a 3-pack, but they're very effective when learning to play tennis. Very early learners. We're going to use these in some of our lessons, okay? Another tennis ball that I like, kind of in the progression of things, is what we call the red ball. So I almost went a little faster there than I wanted to, but this red ball bounces about 60% of the compression of a regulation ball. So what does that mean again? It means it's going to give every child who's within a certain range of height the best possible chances to hit this ball when learning how to rally and play. The next ball is the orange ball. In tennis, there's a progression of growth. And as I mentioned earlier, the tennis courts are about 78 feet, and they come within 60 feet as well. There's even a 36-foot court. The 36-foot court is what works for the red ball. The orange ball is for a 60-foot court. And what it's going to do is bounce about 75% of the compression, almost up to 80 of a regulation ball. And this is just going to give you, again, another opportunity to learn how to play, and the ball will travel a bit slower in space so that by the time you're ready to set up, you're learning techniques very well because the ball is coming at you at a pace and a speed that supports your development and your growth. So it's important, again, to recognize that these balls may not be as easily accessible as the regulation ball, but it's important to try to get your hands on a few just to give your kids the best possible chance. But any tennis ball will work. Lastly, I want to show you the regulation ball, and we're all familiar with these because you can go just about anywhere, even your local Walgreens, and purchase one of these balls. Again, they're going to bounce a little bit more. Did you see how high that came with a nice little bounce there? And when this ball is bouncing that high, I can only imagine someone who's 5, 6, or 7 years old, this ball coming at them, they're going to run for the hills because this ball is going to have added speed, it's going to have a little added power behind it, and it's really going to hop very high, which again is going to impact your technique. So we have a lot of fun ahead of us. And one thing I want to do is I also want to make sure you're prepared well. Tennis is one of the kinds of activities that require your body being in motion and all parts of your body that are a part of the game having a lot of flexibility and a lot of activity. The thing I want to help you to do is understand athletically, this is what's going to be important about your development. So I want to start with you today and do a few warm-ups just to kind of show you how to get your body ready for tennis. You ready for that? All right, welcome back again. So here's what we're going to do first. We're going to do what's called a reset exercise. Your body has had a timeout and it needs a little help to get some energy. And that reset exercise is something that you'd love to do. Can you do this with me? You see how I just feel like my body's just kind of resetting and I'm getting all of what's inside of me just kind of back in order. So I'm going to let my arms just jiggle and swing, kind of like cooked spaghetti noodles. And I'm just going to let my body just have some energy right now. I can even try to do a little bit of this and get my body to cooperate and just start resetting because it's just been kind of wound up for a long time. How's that feel? Yeah? Let's take a break. Think you can do that again? Maybe consider doing that in a couple of cycles where you do it for 30 seconds or 15 seconds, whichever's comfortable. Take a breath in between. Take a deep breath, get that energy, and begin resetting some more. And just get your body to get nice and loose. Loose, loose. There you go. Look at, yeah, that's great. Yes, you can lock higher if you want to, but just try to remain as coordinated as you possibly can. Okay. Stop. Again, what a great way to get the body ready to go for tennis. Okay? How about this? Some of you like to run. I want to introduce just mild jogging. You can do this in a circle if you have enough space, or you can do it in place. And it's just getting your legs going. Nice and quiet. Keep your head up as much as possible. Yeah, just find your balance. And jog in place. Maybe you're good enough to do this. And back. And one more time. And back. And the opposite direction. And back. But that just gets your heart in a great space and place so that now your blood is flowing, you've got good circulation, and you're ready to go. Okay? Wow. That's one that's going to take your breath away. All right, let's talk about stretching. I'm going to move some equipment aside here just for safety's sake. And what I like about stretching, guys, is I like it to be dynamic. Do you know what that means? Well, there's two different ways. We can stretch, and we can be very static, or we can be very dynamic. Stretching when you're static is when we spread ourselves apart and kind of just hold. Nothing wrong with that. And hold. Or hold. Very static. But dynamic stretching means you've got some movement. Let's do a coordinated stretching exercise. With your opposite hand, you can start with your strongest hand if it's your right hand or your left, but you're going to raise your opposite leg to tap your knee. That way. And the opposite. But here's what we're going to do. We're going to get this going. And we're going to stretch a little bit. And we're going to be dynamic. And we're going to move. A little bit of coordination involved here, right? Yeah. Sometimes I used to go, but I figured it out. Take my time. And I can add speed to this, or I can even add different variations. But what I want you to do is just think about getting your body moving again, ready for some dynamic movement. Another example of dynamic movement, lunges. But we're going to do them with a twist and movement. Dum, twist, step, da, twist, step, da, twist, step. Oh, opposite leg, Keith, da, twist, and step. And we can do those kinds of stretches to get ourselves moving in a very dynamic way. Again, you can do a static lunge and just hold it as long as possible. But I like it when we're moving because it gets our muscles to stretch. And that's going to be important for tennis. Everybody feeling good? All right, good job. Let's talk about agility. I'm going to adjust a few more things here and create some opportunities for agility and speed. Whatever you may have, it could be a simple rope. You can draw with chalk on the sidewalk. Make a nice line. We'll make a second line in just a moment. But the first line is just going to create an opportunity for us to get some speed movement going. Tennis is about quick bursts of energy. Many times we think tennis is just one of those sports you can just kind of lull and take your time. You really can't. You've got to be ready to move. So one of the ways we train you to do that, kids, is by teaching you how to move quickly. So we'll start with a little slowness just to get the rhythm, right? We've got ourselves moving. We're stepping back and forth over the line. And we're going to be deliberate with our movement. Try to maintain as much balance as you can. And as you feel good, you can start speeding that up just a little bit. There you go. I hear your feet tapping now. Excellent. Faster. Some of you are probably already going about 30 miles per hour. Slow down. We're not in a hurry. But now we can pick it up a little bit more. And finish. How about that? Lots of movement. Lots of fast, quick movement with our feet. And that's what's going to be required when you have to move all of those spaces on a tennis court to cover that. Okay? Here's another example of some quick movement. We're going to use our lines again, and we're going to draw a second line just a few feet over, maybe 2 feet. Measure that as close as you can. And here's what we're going to do. We're going to step in, step out. Step in, step out. Step in, step out. Step in, step out. And we're going to start with rhythm so we can get the timing. It's okay if you step on the line, but keep moving as much as possible. And out. And out. And as you're ready, pick up the pace a little more. Where your feet are almost just barely touching the ground. Look at all that energy we're creating. Your heart should really be pumping now. Good job, guys. One more time. Excellent. Good job. So now that your heart's beating well and I'm sweating profusely, it's okay because you're going to have the same kind of energy flowing through your body as well. Let's look at another exercise. This is called the cone shuffle. And you can only imagine what that means. Those of you who have been playing tennis, you've heard that word shuffle, right? It's ringing a bell in your ears right now. We're going to get those feet moving now. And we're going to create a figure 8 space. In other words, we're going to go around the cone, back in between, around the cone, back in between. And we're going to do this on a steady pace. But let's start very slow, okay? Catch your breath. Athletic position. And begin. Step outside. Keep your feet apart. Oh, kick the cone just like that. It's okay. That's going to happen. And come back around again. And keep your feet apart. And back through again. And make sure you maintain a nice balance with your body as best as possible. Try to avoid leaning over. Find as much balance as you can. good movement, guys. Shuffle, shuffle, shuffle. All right, 2 more of those. 1, 2, we're done. Excellent movement, good perspiration, good body energy. We're going to adjust, and we're going to create more strength, and we're going to create hops. Between the cones, we're going to hop to the side. It's okay if you touch it again. Hop to the outside. Hop to the inside, hop to the outside. Just going to create some strength in those legs, because tennis players are explosive. And that's what tennis is about. When moving to hit tennis ball, you explode into the ball. That's the idea. So having leg strength, having core strength is very important for tennis. All right. Now that my heart's up and I'm sweating, that just means my body is ready. I'm ready to get outside, get myself stretched out, play some tennis, and get myself going. You guys ready? Let's have a little fun. The other thing I want to do is I'll give you a few more tips about racket handling. I want you to think about this. A simple tip. There are ways to just, even without a tennis ball, just practice the movement and the flow of the stroke. Think about the things that are going to be very important. So when we're thinking about the flow of the stroke, nice and relaxed movement. Just nice and relaxed with the forehand as well as the backhand. And controlling that racket head and that racket face at the point of contact when the ball is being sent across the net. So tennis players, we're not vain, but it's okay to go ahead and look in the mirror and take a look at yourself and see if your movements match what you're feeling your stroke should feel like. And it's okay to just say, am I setting my racket in a good position? Do I feel it coming back through the swing zone to contact? And do I have a very effective follow through? Those are things I love to mirror and take a look at myself, and sometimes just check out the hairline, make sure it's okay as well. That's totally okay. And the last thing I want to mention about simple tips is the kinetic chain. We're going to talk a little bit more about this later on. But the kinetic chain is about reminding ourselves of where the power and control of tennis comes from. It starts in the bottom. It starts with your legs. It starts with using the energy that's in the ground, allowing your legs to coil, allowing your core of your body and your hips to make a nice coil as well. That's your unit turn. And also allowing yourself to swing with that core and flow into that shot with as much control as you possibly can. That's where your power comes from. Not in how fast you swing your arm, but in how much of the energy from the ground up you use. Are you ready for this? Let's have a little fun. We'll get into some tennis opportunities. Very simple preparation tips. Well, hello kids, welcome back. We're going to get into a few racket handling skills now. And what I want you not to be concerned about is how you're holding it based on the grip. We'll talk about that down the road. I want you to find a comfortable way of holding your racket. And here's what I mean by that. With your tennis racket just lying face on the ground, just take the palm of your hand, if it's your right hand or your left hand, and just reach down comfortably, pick it up comfortably, and hold it comfortably in a ready position, just like that. Okay? Again, just with your racket nice and flat on the ground. With your left hand, that you reach down, pick it up comfortably, and just hold it very comfortably that way. And this is what I want you to do with our next exercises. And we're going to do what we call racket handling skills. So what we're going to do is learn how to balance the ball on the strings, use our leverage in our bodies to create a nice body posture, very athletic, and we're going to do some controlled activities. You want to do that? All right, let's do it. So let's have you also capture a tennis ball, whatever type you have, it doesn't matter, but we're going to begin with some balancing exercises. So go ahead and lay your racket back on the ground, just like that. Put your tennis ball right on the face of the strings, and when you're ready, you're going to reach down nice and comfortably again, and you're going to pick it up, and you're going to be nice and balanced, okay? That's one way we're going to begin today. But we're going to begin with our hand on top of the racket, and we're going to turn it opposite direction, and here's how we're going to do that. With the ball balancing on your strings, you're going to lift it, let it bounce, and catch it on the opposite side. Did you see how I turned that hand over? Now we're going to do the opposite and flip that hand back over. Oh, bouncing got away from me. I got another ball. Look at that, guys. And we're going to toss it in the air, bounce, and flip that hand over and let that ball balance on the strings. Do it again. With the hand now at the top of your hand, roll to the other side. Once more. And that's just going to allow us to see how well we're able to control the racket head and keep the racket face nice and flat. Kind of like a pancake on a plate, right? Here's what would happen if your racket is not so flat. When the ball bounces, it'll run away from you and you'll have to go capture it, okay? Sometimes that'll happen and that's okay. So go ahead and toss it again. Try to get it as nice and flat until the ball comes to a rest on your strings. Now that's a great skill to learn because we're going to learn a little bit about racket handling and how to keep that racket face nice and flat so that when you learn to hit the ball, it has a similar position. And from this position with a nice flat racket face, the ball tends to travel in the direction you want it to go. So we're going to do some racket handling. How about what we call bump ups and bump downs? Some of you kids who've taken lessons from us, this is how it looks. So go ahead and begin with your racket in a flat position with your palm up and your ball on your strings, and you're going to drop it and bump it. Drop it and bump it. Drop it and bump it. This is another form of control. Keeping it nice under your control, and your ball's only going to go about head high as your head's going. No higher than that. Once it gets too high, you lose control. So we're going to bring it back to a nice, comfortable place. Try to maintain as much care and space control as you can, and freeze. Wow, look at that. Good job. Now we're going to do the opposite where we flip the hand again and practice our bump ups and bump downs. We'll toss it and bump, 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 and bump. See the rhythm? Bump, bump. Notice my athletic position. I'm not standing too tall where I might lose control, but if I get back in this position, that's a good athletic position for tennis. And rest. Maybe you'll learn to do that too. So what we're learning here is just racket control, racket handling, making sure we know how to keep our racket nice and flat, that it moves with our body when it's necessary and it stays flat, versus losing control when we're moving our body. Okay? So that's racket handling. Something else we can do is called SelfRally. You might find something that's just round. Maybe you have one of these kinds of devices here. So what we're going to do is we're going to stand just a little bit to the side, and we're going to balance the ball on our strings, and I want you to point your toes towards the direction of the line that you have on the ground. Now you're going to drop and bump, and try to drop it somewhere near your target on the floor. And try to get it back to that target. There we go, we're getting closer. I'm going to hit my target. I'm just away from my target. I'm going to get back again. This is called the SelfRally. You see how we're doing that? And we're just trying to control things in a space so that we're not chasing this ball all over the tennis court or in your living room, wherever you may be. So again, this is called the SelfRally. Get your feet lined up towards your marker, get your ball balanced on your strings, and begin your rally. Somewhere near your target area. Some of you, if you have an extra tennis racket, could lay a tennis racket in that space and use that as well for your target area. Maybe you can borrow your parents' tennis racket for that. But again, it's just an opportunity to practice athletically how to control a tennis ball. Good job, you guys. I can hear the balls bouncing. They're all over the place. Oh, watch out for that chandelier. Got to be careful there. Okay? All right. Everything's going to be okay because these are really soft too, by the way. The next thing we're going to do is if you're having a little trouble controlling your tennis ball, one thing I want to show you that it's just a different way of learning how to make sure your racket stays in a nice flat position. You begin in this position with the ball just in front of your lead foot here, and with your racket in this position, you're just going to push it along the line and stop, and push it back the other direction, and stop. And what you're learning to do is to keep that racket as controlled as you can, and both of your hands, both the back side of your hand as well as the front side of your hand are working together again. Okay? That's a good way to just make sure you're controlling that racket if you're having a little bit of a challenge, and just get that racket to stay under your control. Good job. Everybody's doing great so far. Okay, next we're going to do a little rally time. I have a tennis wall behind me. Some of you can probably find a place that you can go And it could just be a nice brick wall. It could be a garage door, but make sure you're using a very soft tennis ball. I wouldn't want you to ruin your paint job for your parents' garage door. But just a nice flat surface, okay? And what we're going to do is practice bumping the ball to the wall and catching the ball after the bump. So it's going to look kind of like this. You're going to drop it, bump it, let it bounce, catch it with a trap. We call that trapping the ball. So what we want to do is get the timing of a very short backswing. This doesn't take a long backswing because if I did that, I can guarantee that ball's going to ricochet and take off somewhere down the block. Okay? So very quietly, bump, trap. This is just going to help you with the timing and the feel of what the ball feels like when it hits your strings and you're sending it to your opponent. Drop. You're doing this with a lot of control. Okay? Drop. Catch. Let's imagine now we're hitting this ball over a tennis net. That's what my blue stripe is all about. Because if I were not and I hit it below the stripe, that's going to probably jump right into the tennis net, and that's not going to allow the ball to travel. So think about finding a spot on the wall, hitting it above that spot, and trapping it. And trap. Good job. Keep practicing that. Let's do 5 more of those together. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Notice again, very short backswing. Nothing very long because you'll lose control very quickly. Okay? So those are just a few examples of racket handling as we're getting back into tennis. It's just introductory. It's just an exercise. I'm going to teach you a lot more about the full swing and about playing tennis up and over the net, but we're going to learn how to just get ourselves back into a space of understanding how to control the racket face. Okay? Sounds like a fun thing. Next thing I want to do is something that's coordinated. So if I can grab a second tennis ball, what a magic trick that was, right? Here's what's going to happen. I've got 2 squares on the wall there, and I'm going to pretend that that's my friend on the other side, but I'm going to use the wall as my friend. And I'm going to take those tennis balls in my hand with one to start with, and I'm going to toss the ball to the first square on the same side of the body that I'm on. I'm going to toss it and catch it. And then I'm going to switch the ball over to the opposite hand, toss it to that square, and catch it. Now that doesn't seem too challenging, right? But we're going to look at how we can get very coordinated in learning to play tennis by seeing what it means that when a ball is being hit to us from our opponent, what we're doing to coordinate ourselves to receive that ball. Tennis is about sending and receiving. Sending and receiving. Sending and receiving. Sending and receiving. And the coordination is when that ball comes back, I'm receiving it in a similar position that I'm catching it with my tennis racket. Okay? So here's how we're going to challenge ourselves. Notice we have the 2 squares, and I start with the ball in my left hand. I'm going to toss the ball at a diagonal to the opposite square and catch it with the hand on that side of the body. And I'm going to switch that by tossing this diagonal and catching it with the other hand. And so this is going to challenge me a bit more to now start noticing my body has to move to adjust, because my opponent is doing their best to get me off balance. And tennis is about hitting a ball where your opponent isn't. It's not who can hit the hardest or who hits the fastest. It's hitting it where your opponent isn't. And the more you get them moving, they lose their balance. When you can get your opponent to be off balance, their strokes are not as clean. So again, that's a challenge for you. That's just playing what we call hitting or tossing diagonal and what we call in tennis cross court. Okay? Those are some big words, but you'll learn those as you go along. Here's one more example of a great activity I want you guys to be ready to do, and this is going to challenge you. Are you ready? We're going to need 2 tennis balls for this one, so I'm going to gather my second ball, and we're ready to go. I'm a magic guy. You guys didn't know that, did you? I'm going to challenge myself by tossing this ball to the wall and catching it, tossing that ball to the wall, but I'm going to do it simultaneously and see if I can catch those balls. And this is just a fun way to challenge my coordination. Wow, look at that. I zone in on that ball so well that I know how to track it here and track it there. Wow, that's called serious tracking, because those balls are going to start speeding up as you're learning to play tennis. I must teach you as an instructor how to track the ball as soon as possible. So that's going to be a great skill for you as well. And so I want you to practice that and have a little fun with that one. Okay? So here's what we're going to do to kind of wrap up today. I want you all to think about, as you're preparing to become tennis players, that it's very important that you also develop the strength that's required. One of the exercises I want you to really focus in on is what I call a core exercise. And some of you may like to do this, but it's just putting yourself in this position. Let your feet in the air if you want to, but just cross over and over and over. Because in our next segment, we're going to learn about how you actually hit a tennis ball. It's not just with your arms. It's actually with your hips, your pelvis, as well as your core. And that's where all the power and control of hitting a tennis ball comes from. All right, hello everyone, it's Keith again. Welcome back. We're going to look at some simple preparation tips for getting you guys ready for this tennis season. And as I mentioned, take your time. You know, we've been away from the sport for a while. It's just important to get your body back into a nice rhythm and a nice tune for activity, just so that we can ensure that we're going to avoid as many injuries, maybe even avoid developing some of those poor techniques. With that time and that layoff, it's so easy to forget some of the most important things. So we're going to go back to some of the very foundational, very slow movement components, what we again refer to as biomechanics. And we're going to just really focus in on how the body moves and how we get the energy flowing, and ensuring that our hip and our pelvis is working along with our core, so that we can get all of the movements that are required to get the racket head moving through the hitting zone. So let's do that together. Let's start again by just getting a little loose today. So what I'd like you to do is just think about getting your body just to kind of flow nice and smooth. Allow those arms to become very relaxed, okay? What I don't want to see is this. I don't want to see your arms nice and tight. That's kind of what typically happens. But we're going to isolate today some of the parts of the body that maybe aren't moving as fluid as you might think they could be. So what I want you to do while your arms are just swinging, I want you to try to engage your hips. And what that means is we're going to get your pelvis to make a thrusting kind of move on both sides of your body. And so what we're going to do is when your arms are here, you're going to move your hips to make your arms come back around. Okay? There we go. Move your hip and make your arms come back. It's kind of a really fun and kind of awkward coordination activity, but just get those hips to isolate, isolate, isolate. Get those hips to go. There you go. You got it. You got it. Yeah, you're going to feel a little awkward right now, but I really want to focus in on how to just get the body to loosen up. Because when we're doing some of these next activities, we're really going to isolate and show that hitting a tennis ball is more than using your arms and isolating your shoulders, but we're going to engage the core as well as your pelvis and hips and get you moving in that direction. Another way to get loose is just let your body shake again. You know, just get yourself in a position where you're just shaking and you can get your arms moving again, and just let them flail around again. There you go. Just do that for about 15, 20 seconds. Yeah, just let your body move. Just let it move. There you go. We're just going to reset everything. We've had some time off. We're going to get our arms moving. Yeah, there you go. Nice and loose. So again, just work on getting your body to just work with you. Work with you. That's a tough one there, I tell you. But just get those arms and hips to move, okay? Good, that's our reset and our cycle to get our bodies to move. Now we're gonna look at pelvis activation. So go ahead and grab your racket. And for today's purposes, I'm gonna show you from the backhand position. I'm a two-handed backhand player. So what I'm gonna show you from that position is just how to isolate your hips, your pelvis. So what I'd like you to do is put your racket in a position where you're holding it between your hands. Go ahead and put it in that sideways position. And what I want you to do is stand in what's called the neutral stance. We're also going to demonstrate from the open stance. But for now, we're going to start in a neutral stance position. And what I want you to do is isolate your hip and just thrust it forward. Just like that. Thrust your hip forward. Yeah, just like that, thrust. Now, I know that when you have trouble isolating your hip, your racket will do this. So what I want you to focus on is holding that racket in this position and moving that hip forward. Just moving it forward. There you go. Get that core and that hip to just kind of flip is what we're calling it. Make the hip flip. There you go. Just isolate that. Good job. So again, from a nice neutral stance, flip that hip again, and flip that hip again, and flip that hip again. Excellent. One more time. Flip that hip just like that. We can also do something very similar in an open stance, where again, getting in the position, getting your heels and set in position, and flip your hip. It's not as natural, but again, it's just flipping that hip. I just want you to isolate the hip. So again, I know it's not isolating if I see that, okay? So we're gonna try to avoid that, and if you find yourself coming halfway, you're getting there, we just wanna isolate that hip. Isolate that hip. Just get it to flip. Isolate that hip. Good job, good job. Isolate that hip. Let's go back again to the nice neutral stance and flip that hip again. And this is something you can do just before a match, just before you're getting out to play as a warm-up exercise, but it's something you can practice at home, again, just to get your body to start getting in line with what we want to do, okay? So that's just, again, activating our pelvis, activating our hip, getting ourselves in position, and we want to isolate that by holding that racket in a nice, comfortable position, okay? The next thing I want to do is I want to isolate the core of your body. Contrary to what we believe, tennis is not about using just your arm, or again, in the backhand, just using your arms. It's really about activating the core of your body. So one of the ways I like to activate my core is sometimes I'll just get in a position and I'll just rock side to side. There's a lot of different core types of exercises. If you feel really comfortable, you can get your feet in the air, do the Russian twist. That's the one that requires a lot of balance, but it's definitely something you can work on, okay? Just nice, get that core nice and isolated. That's important. Some of the other ways you can do is do some homework and look at doing some planks. That's one way that's going to really activate your core, get your core very strong, because we're going to really focus on how we get that core to coil. And with the strength of the core from that coiling, that's where we're going to find a lot of our strength in our racket stroke, okay? So core activation is very important. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at that from a backhand position again. And from here, we're going to get the whole body to come forward. There's that uncoiling. Uncoil that core. See how that core is facing you now? Just flip that hip and allow the core to come around. Flip the hip. And make sure the hip is flipping, because sometimes players will try to just hit from the core and see how it changes my posture. We really want that hip to engage with the core to bring that racket around. Notice what else is engaging when I do that. You're right, it's my shoulders. My shoulders are also coming in line. It's a part of the kinetic chain. It's all coming together. When the hip comes and the core comes together, the shoulders work in unison. And as those parts work together, that's where you find all the power and control in hitting a tennis ball. Okay? So again, just focusing on getting the hip and the core to move. We can do that from an open stance position again, and just flip. Here we go. And flip. You can come up on that right toe, just that way. Flip and get that core. Flip. Excellent. Good job. Flip that hip. Good job. There you go. Try to maintain that balance and flip that hip as much as you possibly can. So again, working on those kinds of exercises and activities, that's going to start building a great foundation for understanding biomechanically what your body does when playing tennis. Okay? Now we're going to activate the legs. So we've got the hip and the pelvis and the core, and the exercise we're going to use to activate the legs as a demonstration. So I'm going to use these stairs here right behind me, and I'm going to prepare myself and get in that neutral stance again. And I'm thinking about my hip, I'm thinking about my core. I'm going to place one foot up on the stairs, and I'm going to flip the hip and the core, just like that. One more step up, and flip the hip and the core. One more step up, and flip the hip and the core. One more step here, and flip that hip. So you see how we're kind of getting the hip and the core to come around together. So again, land that foot nice and sturdy and strong. Think about your hip. Is it moving? Oh, there it is. Yep, it's ready to go. And I'm going to flip that hip. And I'm not so concerned about the full swing yet because I'm focusing on the lower body, okay? Just really focusing on the lower part of the body. Is that hip flipping around? Good job. One more time up here. Is it flipping around? Excellent. That's what we want to focus on. How much of that can we get to work together? Because that's where, again, the power and the control of a ground stroke is. One more time. Neutral stance. Flip that hip. Good job. Flip the hip. Flip the hip. And flip the hip. And flip the hip. Excellent. Let's take a look at that from an open stance. We're going to put the left foot up on here, get the core to tighten up, and we're going to lean into that. Okay? Next foot up again, we're going to lean into that. Notice how we're also working on maintaining a stable position and creating stability when we stand up high. Good job. Left foot and lean into that. One more time. Left foot and lean into that shot. That is the open stance position, which means you're just leading with the opposite foot from the neutral stance. What can happen from an open stance is sometimes you can lose your balance. So what you want to focus on is slowing down, find your stance, make it stable, and nice and high and hold that position. One more time. Nice and high and hold that position. Good job. Good use of the core. And nice and high and hold that position. Excellent. And again, sometimes you get a little too fast here and you'll fall over on yourself. Just slow down, find your position, and lift. And try to hold that balance for a split second. Okay? So again, just working on how to use the hips, how to use your core, and how the rest of the body begins to work in unison from the ground up, which is where all of your energy comes from. Another good exercise, a part of this whole process, is the transference of that weight. So when we're thinking about the two-hand backhand, we're thinking about the position we're in, we're thinking about transferring weight. So notice the rocking kind of position I have. I've got my weight coming forward. What happens with a lot of tennis players is we'll hit off of our back leg. And from here we lose control of the racket head, the direction of the ball traveling, and then we're not going to find much power. We're going to be very inconsistent. The goal is to get your weight and your posture to lean into your shot. Into your shot. So into your shot is what we're looking for. So transferring the weight. Notice how the hip is coming and it's bringing that racket and the core around and into the shot. Same thing, very similar with the open stance. Again, starting from this position and into the shot. And into the shot. And notice how we're coiling and spinning up. With that two-hand backhand from an open stance position, it's really allowing you to move forward and into the shot. And you're not falling back again in a position that makes it very challenging to control the ball. One of the last components that's very important about all of this is how your wrists work. So when we think about hitting a tennis ball, a lot of people approach it with a very firm grip and very strong arms and lots of tension. And their ground strokes tend to look like this. And if you notice with this two-hand backhand, all the attention is on my upper body. There's nothing happening in the lower regions. My core is not connecting or anything. What we want to do is relax those wrists. So one way we do it is we talk about just kind of creating a nice little fluid motion. And what that's going to do is, again, just an exercise, and it's just an exaggeration, but I want you to think about being nice and fluid, okay? Because what we're going to find out in a moment is how we just kind of get all that to work together. Nice and fluid. So this is just basically what we call a wrist lag exercise. Notice how the racket head lags just there, and I create a lot of racket head speed when I can create that lag. Okay? Nice lag. So flip the hip with that, flip the hip with that, flip the hip with that, and flip that hip again. And you're just getting nice and relaxed. So this is an exercise at home I'd like you to really focus on. A lot of players have a lot of difficulty with this kind of movement. So just again, nice and smooth, nice and smooth. Kind of imagine a figure 8 on the ground, putting two rackets back to back like this, just kind of helps you with the understanding of the motion. Nice and smooth. And again, it's just an exaggeration, but it's just the idea of getting you to flow and to move, okay? All right, I want you to feel that, and the last piece I want you to feel is the arm extension. So just as we're again making that move, and we'll get ourselves in that nice, comfortable stance here, we're going to get the racket head moving as we flip the hip and feel that racket extend out to our target. So that looks kind of like this from this position. From here, as my hip flips, and brings the racket forward, that's where I want to extend out into the court. A lot of times we get really excited about the speed of what's causing all of this fluidity. And sometimes we'll overswing. And that's what typically it looks like when you're beginning. And it's kind of like baseball and you're thinking that's the swing. But tennis is a lot more controlled from the standpoint that we want to extend out to the stroke. And from here, there's a nice follow through. So really focusing again on getting the hip to flip. Move that hip as much as you can with those exercises again. Just get that hip to move. Make it very static from this position, but flip the hip. Flip the hip. And then add the next position when the weight transfers. And the weight transfers. And we're getting that hip to move as much as possible. So one thing I want to do is talk a little bit about some of the basic mistakes, common mistakes that come up as we're kind of developing and training ourselves. One of the things is about weight transfer. A lot of times with the two-hand backhand and the ball approaches, we'll end up leaning backwards. Notice how my weight is moving this direction. What I want you to focus on is as the ball's coming, you're stepping in and creating a posture where you get to now allow the lag to happen and the hip to flip, and bang, you're moving into the ball from this direction. So we're going to try to avoid that common mistake of hitting on the back foot and try to get our posture to lean more into the ball from contact and out forward. Okay? Another common mistake is too much weight on the front foot. So once we make that transfer of the weight, sometimes we get over and we fall forward. So what we want to do is really get this lead foot stable, nice and stable. So when I make this move and I flip my hip, I want to really become strong and stable and not fall over to the front of my body. Okay? Another thing is not coiling your hips or your pelvis. Very common mistake. We see a lot of players who see a ball coming and they just kind of approach it this direction and they swing as hard as they can and they're very tense. But notice the hips are facing in a direction where you're losing some opportunity for flexibility. So we really want to focus on, again, getting a nice coil and an unloosening of those hips. Get those hips to loosen up and to move into the shot, and that's what's going to give you power and control. And the last thing to remember, keep those wrists nice and relaxed as much as possible. Again, this is just an exaggeration, but it's a great way to exercise, get yourself in a position to understand you want to be as relaxed as possible when hitting a tennis ball. Once again, we want to thank you for participating in our at-home tennis classes. If you want to learn more about other program offerings that we have, be sure to follow Denver Parks and Recreation on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube, and visit denvergov.org/recreation. Thank you. We look forward to the next session with you.